They sat me by the kitchen, behind a swinging door, next to a stainless steel cart propped up by a stray napkin to keep its wheel from squeaking. There, in that narrow gap between the buffet trays and the door, I watched my son get married through a crack no wider than a few inches. I could see glimpses of the crowd, flashes of the floral arrangements, the swirl of my new daughter-in-law's dress. I managed to spot a tray of shrimp cocktail I had paid for, though I never actually tasted one. I'd bankrolled the entire wedding, every flower, every gilded chair, every orchestral flourish. When the music started and the toast began, you'd think I would be at the center of it all. But I wasn't. I wasn't even close. I smiled politely, stayed quiet, and then, after the last slice of cake was served, burned it all to the ground with a single phone call. Before any of that, before the chaos, I kept waiting for some sign that this was all just a mistake. Maybe it was a simple oversight. Perhaps there had been a misunderstanding about where I was supposed to sit. Yet no usher approached, no staff member rushed over to say, "Mr. Owens, you're supposed to be at the head table." Nobody came. From my vantage point, I saw only the swirl of activity from the kitchen staff. The smell of lemon pepper marinade and overheated ovens crowded out my own cologne, the one I wore specially for my son's wedding. I had spent the entire morning preparing, polishing my shoes, pressing my best suit, even going for a fresh haircut that cost more than I usually spend in 3 months. Also, I could hide behind a kitchen door. At first, I told myself, don't ruin this for him. Don't start an argument or cause a scene. It's his big day. Let Adam have his perfect moment. I kept repeating that in my head like a mantra, even as I sank into the lone folding chair they'd set out for me, a torn paper napkin draped over the seat, as if that would keep the vinyl from sticking to my suit pants. It was humiliating, but I clung to the hope that perhaps it was just a temporary seat. Maybe I was waiting here so we could do some surprise father-son dance, or maybe there was a scheduling quirk I hadn't heard about. Then, I saw the place cards. Everyone else had them. Lovely little nameplates in calligraphy, set on linen napkins. When the bride's mother, Miriam, walked into the reception hall, I heard the applause and the laughter ring out. The father of the bride, George, was introduced with a flourish and a handshake that nearly lifted him onto the dance floor. But nobody said my name. It was like the whole event had been orchestrated to ignore my existence. I remember that morning so vividly, waking up in the hotel room I had booked for myself near the venue, a small but elegant place with a view of a lake in the distance. I set out my tie. I polished my cufflinks, old silver ones that had belonged to my own father. I pressed my dress shirt meticulously. At the time, the excitement swelled in my chest. Despite a strained relationship with Adam over the last few years, I still believed that a wedding was a chance to start fresh. A new beginning, for all of us. It wasn't until I arrived at the historic estate, a barn converted into a charming wedding venue with chandeliers and rustic details, that I realized I hadn't been given a single piece of information about the day's schedule. Weeks prior, I had asked Adam about it. He'd said, "Don't worry, Dad. Charlotte and her folks are handling everything, just show up looking great, and we'll take care of you. We'll take care of you." Those words had echoed in my mind with a fragile sort of hope. I believed him. When I walked in, no one came forward to greet me. The wedding coordinator rushed by once, arms loaded with pastel seat cushions, but didn't glance my way. The violin quartet ran through a sound check near the barn's entrance, ignoring me. I tried to stop a waiter to ask where I should go, but the poor kid looked clueless. Finally, an anxious staff member from the catering service escorted me to my spot, a corner of the kitchen. No sign, no card, no mention of me in any program. They said you're supposed to wait back here, Mr. Owens," the catering boy offered. He couldn't have been older than 20. The expression on his face told me he knew this was inappropriate. He squirmed as if he felt guilty, but there was nothing he could do. He was just following orders. The bride mentioned something about no visual clashes with the color scheme, he mumbled, not meeting my eye. Something about aesthetics and theme, he added, as if that might soothe me. I just stared at him, speechless. "Theme," I repeated under my breath. He nodded, gave me a meek shrug, and then scurried off to deal with a stack of plates that had fallen off the metal cart near the sink. So there I sat, on a stained folding chair against a wall with chipping paint. Every few moments, the door swung open and smacked the wall with a metallic thud. Then, for half a second, I could see the swirl of chiffon dresses, men in pressed suits, and the soft glow of fairy lights strung across wooden beams. I could smell lavender-scented candles and the crisp perfume from someone walking by. And then the door would snap shut again, leaving me stuck with the odor of garlic and old cooking oil. To understand how we got here, you need to know a bit about Adam. He was my entire world for so many years, my only child. His mother left us when he was very young. The short version is that she and I married too soon, too recklessly, and had a baby before either of us was mature enough to handle that level of responsibility. When she left, I promised myself I would raise Adam so well that he'd never feel he was missing anything. I filled in the gaps. I cooked, I cleaned, I worked long hours at a job that demanded all my patience and skill so we could afford tutoring, soccer cleats, braces, whatever he needed. But times had gotten tough in his teenage years. Adam was bright, but he resented the structure of our life. Maybe he needed a mother figure, maybe he just chafed against my rules. I'll never know. We argued about curfews, about his choice of friends, about the music he blared at all hours. It nearly broke me, trying to hold on to him. I recall the day he told me he was applying to colleges out of state. He said it like he was dropping a bomb, eyes cold, posture rigid. "I'm leaving, Dad, and I might not come back," he declared. Back then, it hurt, but I respected his ambitions. I wanted him to thrive. I gave him everything I could, financially and emotionally. I even took out a second mortgage on the house for his tuition. I never once asked him to reconsider. Over time, we spoke less. He found a group of friends, discovered new interests. Once in a while, I got a phone call on my birthday, if he remembered. Sometimes I didn't hear from him for months. That was life, I told myself. Kids grow up, they drift away. I tried not to resent it. I wanted him to have the life I never had. Then he announced his engagement to Charlotte, a woman I'd met just once in passing. She was polite enough that day, but a bit distant, like she was checking a box, meeting the father-in-law, so I could sign off on future expenses. Over the following year, I was asked to cover more and more for the wedding, a bigger venue, better linens, a grand rehearsal dinner, a custom floral arch that cost more than my car payments. And I said yes, every time, because I believed it was my duty as a father. I couldn't give him a perfect childhood, but maybe I could give him a perfect wedding. Now, sitting in that kitchen corner, I realized how naive I'd been. I was just the checkbook, the ghost that bankrolled their dream. There was no seat at the table for me, literally or figuratively. As the staff shuffled by, dropping off used plates and picking up fresh trays, I began to see the pattern. They'd been told, keep him back here. Don't let him spoil the aesthetics. That phrase repeated in my head. Spoil the aesthetics. As if I were a blemish on an otherwise pretty picture. They had the bride's mother, Miriam, in a place of honor with a designated seat cushion in shimmering rose gold. The father of the bride, George, was front and center too, no expense spared on his seat, I'm sure. But me? I got a battered folding chair. After about an hour of this, I inched closer to the swinging door. Each time it opened, I caught glimpses of the toasts. Miriam's voice carried over the clatter of silverware. To our darling Charlotte and her amazing new husband Adam. We are so thrilled to welcome him into our family. I heard applause erupt, the warmth of laughter surging. None of them knew, none of them cared, that Adam already had a family. Me. Then the father of the bride boomed. Charlotte always said she wanted the perfect prince to sweep her off her feet. Well, Adam, you've proven to be that prince and more. You've given her a fairy tale wedding, thank you. A fairy tale wedding, courtesy of her father? My stomach churned at the irony. Who was it that paid for the 4-tier cake, the handcrafted centerpieces, the open bar? Not George. It was me. When the door flapped open again, I spotted Adam himself, standing tall in a pristine tuxedo. He had a microphone in hand, about to give his groom's speech. My chest tightened. For a moment, a flicker of hope sparked. Maybe this was when he'd thank me. Maybe he'd say my name, acknowledge the years of sacrifice, the nights I stayed up with him when he was sick, the double shifts I pulled so he could join the travel soccer team, the second mortgage for his college. Maybe this was my moment. His voice resonated through the hall, as polished as if he'd rehearsed it a dozen times. I just want to thank everyone for coming today. Charlotte, you've made me the happiest man in the world. And to my new in-laws, George and Miriam, thank you for welcoming me so openly. I already feel like part of your family. I leaned forward, breathless, waiting for him to mention me. One sentence. One word. He never said it. He paused to let the applause roll in and then concluded with, and to everyone who helped make this day what it is, we're so grateful. This is truly the best day of our lives. That was it. That was the nod to the person who'd funded everything, a vague everyone, not a name, not a direct thanks. Certainly no mention of Dad, who had poured his savings into this. I clenched my fists, kept my gaze fixed on him for a second longer, hoping he might turn his head. Look my way. Acknowledge me with a nod, a glance, anything. But he handed the mic back to the DJ, took Charlotte's hand, and they kissed while the crowd erupted in cheers. The door slammed shut again, and my vision filled with trays of congealing pasta, shrimp cocktail remnants, and the out-of-place smell of fruit punch. A server slid by with another stack of plates. She muttered, I'm sorry, under her breath, as if that might help. I didn't respond. If I opened my mouth, I'd either bark in anger or crumble into tears, I wasn't sure which. At some point, a manager in a cheap tie hovered next to me and plopped down a plate of food that had gone cold. Under-seasoned chicken breast, wilted salad, a dab of gravy that had congealed at the edges. He gave me a half-apologetic smile and mentioned something about how the family said it was better for the flow of events if I ate back here. I looked at the plate, at the trembling edges of lettuce turning brown, and it felt like a metaphor for everything I had done wrong. I kept quiet for Adam's sake. I paid for everything. And now, in return, they'd given me a seat next to the trash bins, behind the scenes, a quiet afterthought. Don't ruin his day, I whispered to myself, forcing the rage down. Don't be that father who storms into the middle of the reception. I repeated it over and over, my personal prayer to keep me from making a scene. So I sat. I tried to chew a piece of chicken, but it was cold, rubbery. My stomach revolted, and I set the plate aside. My appetite was gone. Instead, I pulled out the invitation program from my jacket pocket. Elegant cursive on eggshell paper. My name was nowhere to be found. The schedule of events proudly listed the bride's parents, the officiant, the bridesmaids, and groomsmen. Even the ring bearer's name was there. I was invisible? Time crawled. I heard the music shift from soft instrumentals to upbeat dance songs. The door swung open again, letting in the hum of a contemporary pop track. People whooped and hollered. That was the sign that dessert was coming. I could smell the buttercream icing. I'd paid for an ornate cake with multiple tiers, each layer in a different flavor because Charlotte couldn't decide and demanded something elevated. I caught a glimpse of the first slice being cut, Adam and Charlotte feeding each other, smashing a bit on their noses in playful banter. More laughter. More photos. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. As the door flapped back, I was alone again. At some point, a server rummaged in the cooler near me and came up with leftover bottles of water. She offered me one without a word, and I took it. The water was ice cold, harsh against my parched throat. I swallowed. Then something inside me hardened. I can't pinpoint the exact second it happened, but it was the moment I realized I had no place in that room, not in any meaningful way. I was a prop. A wallet. A shadow they stowed away. So I took out my phone. My thumb hovered over a name in my contacts, Rosewood Florals. Then I shifted to the next, Prestige Strings Quartet. Then the bar manager. I had them all on speed dial, Because for the past year, I'd been orchestrating payment after payment. Now, it was time to end the show. My first call was to the florist. I'd finance not only today's blooms but also tomorrow's post-wedding brunch arrangements, extra centerpieces, a fresh floral arch for photos, table runners, all of it. I left a polite, succinct voicemail. Please cancel tomorrow's order. Balance payments are on hold until further notice. Thanks. Next, the band scheduled to play an extended set during the cocktail hour tomorrow. Another short message. We won't be needing the second performance. Consider the contract void from this moment on. No explanation. No apology. Then, the bar service? An all-day open bar was arranged for the day after the wedding so the bride's family could keep the party going. Well, not anymore. The calls took less than 10 minutes total. By the time I finished, my chest felt lighter, as if a weight had lifted. I didn't tremble or second-guess what I had just done. There was no fear. Only a strange sense of liberation. Let them figure out how to explain it to their guests tomorrow. How the music never showed, how the flowers didn't arrive, how the bar wouldn't serve a drop of booze. They wanted to pretend I was invisible. Fine. They could learn, quite viscerally, what it felt like to lose the person who made this entire affair possible. Let them scramble. Let them question. Let them come to me for answers, if they dared. That night, I left before the party ended. I slipped away during the father-daughter dance, George twirling Charlotte under the dim glow of chandelier lights. I took one last look at Adam, who was laughing with a group of friends. He still didn't see me. He never once turned around. I drove to the modest hotel I had booked. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my suit, tie undone around my neck. The digital clock on the nightstand read 11:47 p.m. My phone buzzed. I didn't check it. I already knew who it was, Adam, or perhaps Charlotte, or maybe her parents, realizing something was amiss. I let it ring, then go silent. I kept the lights off. My reflection in the mirror was just a vague shape. Once upon a time, I was a father who read bedtime stories. I kissed band-aids onto scraped knees. I taught Adam how to drive, guided his arms for a slow waltz at a father-son event for his high school. Now, I was a stranger. Sleep never came. I loosened my tie and stared at the darkness until I saw faint outlines of shapes. The hum of the air conditioner was the only noise. Sometime around 4 a.m., I got up, grabbed my laptop, and opened up the wedding expense spreadsheet I'd meticulously maintained. For over a year, I documented every check, every credit card charge. My eyes scanned the columns. Then I saw 2 recent charges that I hadn't authorized, an extravagant bar tab for the rehearsal dinner upgrade, and a lavish tasting event for Charlotte's bridesmaids, both on my card. The notes read, "He'll cover everything, might as well go big, wedding vibes." That was an actual note left in a payment app. My lips twisted in disgust. They felt entitled, as if I owed them the world, all while they hid me in a kitchen. I shut the laptop. My phone still blinked with unread messages, voicemails, text after text. I left them unanswered. Instead, I emailed each vendor with final confirmations, everything for tomorrow, cancelled. No refunds, no rebooking. This was not a negotiation. My voice was calm and courteous in each message, but also undeniably firm. At 6 a.m., I checked out of the hotel, the morning sky still tinged with purple. On my way out, I grabbed a coffee from the lobby. The front desk clerk asked if I was in town for a special event, and I almost laughed at the question. I forced a polite smile and said, "Not anymore." I drove home along a highway that cut through farmland, the scenery eerily still. My headlights carved tunnels through the early morning fog. This numbness started to creep in, the kind of numb that settles in after a heartbreak that's been festering too long. I wasn't angry, not at that moment. I was simply done. But the day's revelations weren't over. When I got to my small suburban home, a white, single story with chipping paint on the shutters, I noticed the rose bushes I'd planted years ago were in full bloom, pink petals tumbling over the walkway. I'd once thought how lovely it would be to have wedding pictures here, Adam posing in front of them, me beaming at his side. Then I shook that image from my head. I went to my bedroom, rummaged through the old cedar trunk at the foot of my bed. It was stuffed with documents, letters, photos. I was searching for something else entirely. An insurance paper I needed to change, now that Adam wasn't truly dependent on me. Instead, I found a letter from my late grandfather. He died just a few months after Adam was born. This letter was one of the last remnants of advice he ever gave me. It read, "Martin, a child isn't about flesh and blood. It's about who shows up when nobody else does. It's about building a future you can be proud of. Love fiercely, but never let love become a chain that binds you to heartbreak." I sat there, tears forming, clutching that letter with trembling fingers. My grandfather knew heartbreak too. He raised my father alone when my grandmother left. Suddenly, I found myself sobbing, quietly, for all that had been lost. For all the ways I had let myself become a wallet, a fixture, a second-class citizen in my own family's event. When the tears subsided, I got up, folded the letter carefully, and placed it back in the trunk. Then, buried at the bottom, I saw something else. A battered envelope in my ex-wife's handwriting. Postmarked from years ago, when Adam was about 10. It was labeled for Martin Confidential. My heart pounded. I didn't recall ever opening it. Perhaps I was too upset at the time, or maybe I assumed it was more legal trouble or empty apologies. But now, with the emptiness in my chest and the chill of what had happened at the wedding, I decided to open it. Inside was a letter, the ink faint and slanted. "Martin, I don't know how to say this without causing you pain, but I can't keep it a secret any longer. Adam isn't biologically yours. I found out after we got married, after I realized I was pregnant from a relationship before you. I thought I could pretend that maybe I was wrong about the timing, but the truth is undeniable. You've been raising a child you believe is yours. I know this is unfair. You have every right to hate me. But Adam sees you as his father, and you've always been more of a parent than anyone else could be." My hands began to shake. The letter went on. You have always deserved the truth, but I was too weak and scared to give it to you. I'm sorry. Despite everything, I still believe you are the best father Adam could have asked for. I sat there for a long time, reading and rereading those lines until the words blurred. So Adam wasn't just ungrateful, he wasn't my flesh and blood at all. Could that explain why I was so easily dismissed? Did he know? Did he sense that we weren't connected by genetics? A strange wave of calm washed over me, as though the missing piece of a puzzle had finally locked into place. So much heartbreak, so many nights I'd told myself, he's my son, he'll come around. Maybe he was never going to come around, because he never felt that tether I assumed we shared. But I had raised him. Every night terror, every school project, every heartbreak, he came to me, and I was there. Biology had nothing to do with that devotion, and yet, here we were, me behind a kitchen door, paying for a wedding where I was politely erased. You might think the discovery would send me into a spiral of fury, but instead, a peculiar clarity set in. If I could raise a child who wasn't mine by blood, and love him wholeheartedly for over 20 years, then I was capable of something extraordinary. I didn't need his thanks or his acceptance anymore. I'd given my best, and I would not accept scraps in return. I walked into the kitchen, set the letter on the table and stared at it. This was my new reality. A father in name only, disowned in public, used for money in private. I wasn't going to pity myself, nor was I going to beg for acceptance. I turned on the faucet, splashed cold water on my face, and breathed in. A sense of freedom flickered in my chest, an ember that might burn away the last illusions I'd clung to. My phone began vibrating again. I checked it this time. A barrage of messages from Adam, from Charlotte, from unknown numbers. Some were frantic, some were outraged. Adam's texts ranged from "Dad, where did you go?" "Everyone's wondering where you are," to "Why are you canceling the brunch flowers?" That's so petty. He never once asked, "Are you okay?" Not a single mention of my feelings. Charlotte's messages were sharper. "Martin, I don't know what you think you're accomplishing, but you're embarrassing us. United States." As though I was some rebellious teenager acting out, instead of the father who had funded everything. The mother of the bride left a voicemail dripping with condescension. "This is Miriam. We need to talk about the cancelled services. People are arriving for the brunch in a few hours, and nothing is set up. This is unprofessional." Unprofessional. I nearly laughed out loud at that word. As if I were a vendor, not a father. I turned off the phone again, dropped it onto the kitchen counter. I wasn't interested in explaining myself. If they wanted a neat, curated event, they should have tried not to stash me behind the scenes like some dirty secret. For the rest of that day, I reclaimed my house in small ways. I gathered every photograph I had of Adam. Not out of spite, but because I needed to stop living among shrines to a relationship that clearly didn't exist anymore, at least not in a form that honored me. I took each frame off the walls and out of the hallway display. Gradually, the house's walls went bare, the leftover nails and empty spots revealing a quiet, ghostly presence. I didn't throw the photos away. I placed them in a sturdy box, labeling it with a single word. Past. The weight of it was tremendous, not physically but emotionally. It contained 2 decades of my life, from Adam's first steps to his high school graduation. I carried it into the garage, set it on a shelf, and dusted my hands as if physically wiping away years of pain. Afterward, I made a simple dinner, eggs and toast, because that's all I felt like cooking. I watched the late evening sun turn the windows golden. For the first time in months, I felt a strange serenity. I wasn't ignoring my pain, I was acknowledging it. And with each breath, I found it easier to let go of the illusions that had weighed me down. Days passed, and the fallout continued. The phone calls turned from outrage to hurt to pleading. "Dad, please call me, I need to explain." Adam's voice sounded frantic in a voicemail left on the second night. Charlotte left a curt text that read, "We need to discuss finances." I never replied. They'd figure out soon enough that the money well had dried up. My bank accounts were under my control. The deposits for future wedding services were cancelled. There was no more extension of my credit for their honeymoon suite or extra catering. I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it because it was my right, and because I was no longer a willing participant in their show. One evening, I took a quiet walk around the block. I had time to notice the small joys. A neighbor's flower bed, the gentle breeze, the hush of crickets. Freed from the burdens of pleasing everyone else, I felt more alive than I had in years. Guilt would flare up sometimes, questions like, am I overreacting? Should I have tried to talk to Adam? But then I'd remember how I was left to fester behind that door, like a family embarrassment. The guilt would vanish. A few days after the wedding, a cousin of mine, Nicole, who had also attended, showed up at my doorstep. She wore an apologetic smile. "Hey, Martin," she said. "Can I come in?" I took a breath, nodded, and stepped aside. She sat at my kitchen table, glancing at the empty walls. "It's different in here," she remarked. "I've been redecorating," I said, trying not to sound bitter. Nicole was one of the few relatives who had occasionally kept in touch with me, though we weren't particularly close. She smoothed her skirt, clearly nervous. "I want you to know," she began, "I had no idea they put you in the kitchen like that. I went to find you halfway through the reception, but I was told you stepped out. I'm sorry, Martin. It shouldn't have gone down like that." I studied her face, looking for any sign of deception or pity. She seemed sincere. "Thank you," I replied quietly. "I appreciate you saying that." She nodded. "Everyone was confused when we couldn't find you. Then the next day, the brunch fell apart. No flowers, no band. Adam was panicked, Charlotte was furious, her parents were flustered. People were whispering about money issues. The rumor mill went wild. Part of me wanted to be smug, but I also felt a pang of sadness that it came to this. "Well," I said, my voice flat. "It's done." Nicole hesitated, then cleared her throat. "Adam told me to ask if you'd hear him out." I stiffened. He can come himself if he wants to talk. She seemed to hold back a sigh. He's worried you'll slam the door in his face. I shrugged. Maybe I will, but that's his risk to take. She left soon after, promising that she'd pass along my words. I had no illusions. If Adam wanted to mend this, he had to come on his own. Without Charlotte's orchestrations, without parental coaching from her side. Instead of waiting for that to happen, I started building a new life. It's remarkable how free one can feel when they release obligations that have been draining them for years. I scheduled a dinner party of my own. My guest list was short and surprising, even to me. A few work colleagues, a friendly neighbor who had always been kind, a former boss who had mentored me after Adam left for college, and an old friend from high school who'd supported me through my divorce. None of them were blood relatives, but all of them had shown me more genuine warmth than my own child had on his wedding day. I wanted to see what it felt like to throw a gathering in my home for people who actually cared about me, rather than draining me for a grand performance. Planning that dinner became a small adventure. I discovered I love picking out recipes, Italian, with homemade pesto, fresh bread from the local bakery, a roasted vegetable dish. I even set the table with linen napkins I'd never used, the ones that had stayed in a drawer for special occasions. This was special because it was mine. I draped soft lights around the living room. I arranged chairs so everyone could talk comfortably. No elaborate color scheme, no forced aesthetics. Just comfort, good company, and respect. When the night arrived, they all showed up on time, each carrying something: wine, dessert, homemade salad. The house filled with laughter, the clinking of utensils, the shuffle of chairs. For the first time in too long, I was host and guest of honor in my own space. At one point, my neighbor, James, raised his glass and said, "Here's to Martin, for reminding us that real family is about who shows up, who cares, and who shares your table with genuine hearts." Everyone toasted, voices echoing with warmth. My chest felt full, in a way that left no room for regret. I was forging new connections, building a circle that recognized me without question. I thought back to the wedding, that rancid smell of marinade and the metallic slam of the kitchen door, and it felt like a lifetime ago. A week passed after my dinner party. I was beginning to think Adam would never show up, that he'd let the resentment simmer until we were two strangers who might pass each other in a supermarket aisle without a word. But late one afternoon, there was a knock at my door, a hesitant, uneven tapping. I looked through the peephole. Adam stood outside, in wrinkled jeans and a t-shirt. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes, like he'd been wrestling with something that refused to let him sleep. I opened the door but didn't greet him with a hug. I just stepped aside. "Come in," I said quietly. He shuffled in, his gaze darting around the living room. He noticed the bare walls. "Where are all the photos?" he asked, voice tight. "In storage," I answered. "They don't need to be displayed anymore." He swallowed, glancing at his own reflection in the TV screen, perhaps searching for words. I waited, arms crossed. This was his to initiate. Finally, he managed. "Dad, I don't understand what went wrong. Everything was going so smoothly, and then you disappeared." I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to rage. "Smoothly for who?" I asked, my voice low. "Certainly not for me." He exhaled sharply. "Charlotte said you were fine with sitting in the back. She claimed you weren't a fan of big crowds. She insisted you told someone you didn't want the attention." My jaw tightened. "That's a lie. And maybe you decided to hide me in the kitchen. You both let me pay for everything, only to treat me as if I were an inconvenience." He rubbed his forehead, visibly upset. "I honestly didn't realize you were shoved back there. I was so caught up in the day." He paused. "Yes, I saw you near the kitchen once, but it didn't register. Charlotte said you had your own seat, that you preferred it. I figured she'd talk to you." I stared at him, a part of me wanting so badly to believe him. But the memory of him giving that speech, thanking everyone, except me, made my skin burn. "That speech," I said, trembling. "I waited for you to say my name, you never did." Adam winced as though struck. Yeah, I messed up. I was nervous. Everyone was looking at me, and I had this script Charlotte helped me write." He hesitated. "I just followed it." "But Dad, I never meant to exclude you on purpose." My lip curled in anger. "Then why was it so easy for you to do it? All day, Adam, you never once came up to me. Not to say hello, not to say thanks, not to introduce me to your new in-laws. Did it never occur to you that I was missing?" He was silent for a few seconds, chewing his inner cheek. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, he said, "I guess I assumed you were around somewhere, talking to other guests. I was so overwhelmed." I looked down at my hands, the same hands that once held his when he learned to walk. "Look," I said, my voice trembling with restrained emotion. "I discovered something else recently. A letter from your mother." His face went pale. You know?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I know you're not my biological son." He sucked in a breath, tears welling. "I found out too, a few years back," he admitted, voice shaking. "Mom told me after I turned 18. I just didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you'd hate me, or that you'd feel it didn't matter because you raised me anyway." "That's the thing, Adam," I replied, forcing myself to keep steady. "I raised you because I loved you. Blood never mattered to me. I would have kept loving you if you had simply recognized that love. But at the wedding, you showed me exactly what I mean to you. A sideline figure, a convenient bank account." He started to cry. Real tears, making his voice tremble. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't see how everything would look from your perspective. I was dumb. Charlotte got all caught up in aesthetics, and I just let her. But you are my father, in every way that counts." I stared at him, raw anger and sorrow twisting inside me. Part of me wanted to comfort him. Part of me wanted to never see him again. "Why did you let me pay for everything, then treat me like a second-class citizen?" He wiped his cheeks. I'm sorry. It was the only words he could seem to form. Suddenly, I realized that nothing he said would undo the pain of that day. Apologies might soothe his guilt, but they wouldn't erase how small and humiliated I felt. I hear your apology, I said, my tone measured. But I need space. I need time. I'm not ready to pretend everything is fine just because you said sorry. Adam looked devastated, but nodded. I'll go, he whispered. I walked him to the door. As he passed over the threshold, he turned. Just, please don't shut me out forever, Dad. I met his gaze. I won't shut you out, but I also won't be the only one trying to repair this. If you want me in your life, you need to show up. Not just with words, but with actions. He left, shoulders hunched, carrying the weight of a mistake he couldn't unmake. That night, I felt a throb of pain in my chest, the old paternal instinct wanting to cradle him, assure him I forgave him. But I also felt strangely resolute. Sometimes, love demands boundaries. I couldn't revert to being the parent who gave everything unconditionally. I needed to be valued, or there would be no relationship at all. I poured a glass of water, then sat at the table and drafted a short note to myself. He isn't your son by blood, but he was yours in every other way. Whether that continues depends on how he chooses to treat you moving forward. I tucked that note into my wallet as a reminder. Days turned to weeks. Adam texted occasionally, asked if we could meet for coffee. I didn't respond right away. My life was surprisingly calm during that period, work was steady, and I started finding small joys. I read more books. I tried recipes I'd always been curious about. I listened to music that made me dance in the living room, not caring if the neighbors saw through the window. The memory of the wedding no longer haunted me with fresh pain. It was more like a faded bruise. Sure, I had moments of anger, of longing, of regret. But as time passed, I recognized how burdened I'd been by a relationship that wasn't reciprocal. Freedom can be lonely at first, but it can also be a breath of fresh air. One Saturday, I decided to throw another small gathering, a barbecue in my backyard. I reached out to the same folks I'd invited before, plus a few others who'd recently come into my orbit through a local volunteer group. No big production, no illusions. Just grilled burgers, a cooler of drinks, and maybe some music on a portable speaker. The day was bright and warm, the smell of charcoal blending with the sweetness of cut grass. People arrived, laughter soon rising above the sounds of sizzling patties. Someone offered to help chop vegetables, another flipped hot dogs. I circulated among them, a host in my own domain. Partway through, the doorbell rang again. I wasn't expecting anyone else. When I opened it, Adam stood there, hands tucked into his pockets. He wore a nervous smile. Nicole told me you were having a barbecue, he said, glancing at the group in the backyard. I brought some lemonade, if it's okay for me to join? He lifted a plastic jug, an almost childlike gesture. My first instinct was to slam the door. But I could see how timid he looked, how uncertain he was. This time, it wasn't about Charlotte, she wasn't with him. It wasn't about aesthetics or money. He was alone, holding a simple jug of lemonade like an olive branch. I took a breath. Come on in, I said. He followed me to the backyard, awkwardly gave a small wave to the guests. Some recognized him, others just assumed he was a friend. Nobody made a fuss. He placed the lemonade on the table and asked if I needed help with anything. Without fanfare, I directed him to the kitchen to grab extra cups. He obeyed, returning with them balanced in his arms, trying to prove his willingness to pitch in. I observed him from across the yard. He looked like a man who'd been caught in a storm and was desperate to find safe harbor. I let him settle into the group without singling him out, because I still didn't know if I was ready to open my heart fully again. But over the next hour, he made conversation. He asked each person how they knew me. He laughed at their stories of me dancing or sharing cooking tips. It dawned on me that he was seeing a side of me he hadn't bothered to see for a long time. Martin, a person with friends, passions, and a life beyond fatherly duty. Eventually, the food was done and people started filling plates. Adam lingered near me, shifting his weight awkwardly. Dad, he said quietly. Could we talk for a minute? I nodded, leading him inside where it was quieter. We ended up in the living room, the faint chatter of the backyard drifting through the screen door. Adam took a breath, hands clasped. I want to earn your trust back, he said. I realize words might not be enough, but I'm here. I'm helping with the grill, I brought lemonade. I'm trying, Dad. I know I messed up badly. I studied him. You did, I agreed. You made me feel worthless after all I've done for you. It still hurts. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I know. I can't fix it overnight. But you raised me, Dad. DNA aside, you're the only real father I know. I don't want to lose you. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I'm glad you're here, but I won't pretend that a plate of burgers and some lemonade erases the wedding day. If we have any future, it needs to be on equal ground. I'm not your wallet. I'm your father. That means respect goes both ways. He swallowed, tears threatening to spill. I understand. I'm ready to do the work. Something about the sincerity in his voice touched a place in me that was still raw. I sighed. Let's just start slow. You can stay for the barbecue, meet my friends, help me clean up afterward. We talk from time to time, we see if we can rebuild. Adam exhaled shakily. Thank you. And so, for the rest of the afternoon, my son found a place at my table, a place he had never known because he was too busy expecting me to fit into his world. We chatted, we laughed in small increments. Nothing big or emotional. He asked questions about how I learned to cook, my new hobbies. He even apologized, unprompted, to my old friend Greg, who remembered seeing me upset that wedding night. Greg had told Adam, you really missed out on having your dad front and center. Martin's a great man, and we all love him. Adam lowered his eyes, nodding. As evening fell, the guests trickled out. Adam stayed to help stack chairs and rinse plates. We worked quietly, side by side, the gentle chirp of crickets in the yard. When we were done, I leaned against the sink, water dripping from my hands. That wasn't so bad, I said, giving him a small smile. He nodded, a flicker of relief in his eyes. No, it wasn't. I'm glad you let me come. I handed him a towel. We stood there uncertain. Then he whispered, Dad, I don't deserve it, but could I hug you? My heart squeezed. Part of me wanted to say no, but another part, the father who held him as a baby, couldn't deny him. So I wrapped him in a brief, gentle hug. He exhaled shakily against my shoulder. In that moment, I realized we were both crying, the kind of quiet tears that come from letting go of pride. When he stepped back, he wiped his face with his sleeve. I promise I'll do better. I hope so, I said gently. Time has moved on. Charlotte eventually wrote me a letter of apology too. Her words felt stilted, more about mitigating guilt than expressing genuine remorse. She and Adam are still married, but she doesn't hold the same power over him she once did. Part of me wonders if she simply sensed that the wallet father role no longer existed, so there's no point in continuing the facade. Adam and I are still navigating how we move forward. We talk more often, usually on the phone once a week. We've met for lunch a handful of times. It's cautious, both of us feeling out the boundaries. I'm slow to trust. He's eager to prove himself. We're in uncharted territory, but at least the lines of communication are open. Meanwhile, I've learned an important truth. I matter. My voice, my presence, my comfort, they matter. For too long, I gave everything to someone who barely acknowledged me, let alone celebrated me. That was my choice, and it's one I'll never repeat. If Adam can meet me halfway, we may still have a future as father and son. But if he reverts to old patterns, I've shown myself that I can step away, because I refuse to be disrespected again. Last week, I hosted another dinner, similar to the barbecue, but indoors because of a cool autumn breeze rolling in. I lit a few candles, set out some hearty dishes, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh bread. This time, Adam joined from the start, bringing homemade brownies he baked himself. He was nervous they'd be undercooked or burnt, but they turned out all right. He mingled with my circle of friends, asked about their lives, told stories of his own. I watched from the kitchen doorway, ironically reminiscent of that wedding day, but the difference was huge. Now, I was watching a room of people who wanted me there, who turned to catch my eye, who called me over the moment they realized I was missing from the conversation. And Adam was part of that group, glancing back, waving me over, making sure I wasn't left out. At one point, he raised a glass of apple cider. Dad, he said quietly, I just want to say how grateful I am that we can spend time together like this. I know I haven't been the best son, but I'm trying. It wasn't a grand speech. He stumbled over some words. But it was real, raw. I lifted my own glass, locked eyes with him. I appreciate that, and I'm glad you're here. We clinked glasses. The last few guests trickled out, leaving Adam and me alone in the kitchen. He helped me wash the dishes, the warm water foaming around our hands. I playfully pointed out that it was the first time I'd seen him do anything resembling domestic work, and he chuckled, acknowledging how Charlotte usually handles it. Then he paused, a plate dripping in his hand. Dad, he asked quietly, do you forgive me? Water dripped into the sink, the moment suspended. I'm working on it, I said honestly. Forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a process. But we're moving in the right direction. He nodded, shoulders relaxing. Yeah, that's fair. That's how it stands now. Not wrapped in a tidy bow, but in progress, day by day. Some nights, I still recall the bitterness of being locked out of Adam's wedding, the backhanded feeling of paying for an entire affair where I wasn't even acknowledged. Those memories rise and fall like an old ache. But I also remind myself of what I gained. Self-respect, a chosen family of friends and neighbors who value me, and the knowledge that I don't need to keep giving until I have nothing left. If Adam wants me in his life, he'll treat me with dignity. If not, I'll carry on without him. In time, I believe we might find a middle ground, father and son, not bound by biology but by choice. This time, though, it's a choice on both sides. I've chosen to stand up for myself. Adam has chosen to reach out. What happens next is uncertain, but at least it's honest. I'll never forget that moment behind the kitchen door, seeing my own child celebrate a milestone of his life, oblivious to my presence, comfortable with the idea that I wasn't wanted in the pictures. But I took that pain and reclaimed my seat at my own table. I built a circle that welcomes me as I am. So if you're reading or listening to my story, remember this. Love is powerful, and so is self-worth. Don't ever let anyone bench you in the kitchen of your own life. If they force you behind a door, walk out, make a call, and remind them that you too have the power to turn off the lights. Or better yet, build a table of your own, one where you're not just the provider, but a cherished guest. The best part? You get to decide who joins you there. Here's to everyone who's ever felt invisible at a party they paid for, who's ever been overlooked by the people they love most. May you find your voice, claim your dignity, and never again apologize for demanding the respect you deserve. Because in the end, no one can take your seat away once you finally decide it's yours.